Welcome to the Abolitionist Sanctuary podcast. Thank you to our viewers on YouTube and our listeners on all audio platforms for streaming this podcast. We are excited to bring to you another episode. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Nikia Smith-Robert, and I have with me our guest, the Reverend Dr. Andre E. Johnson. Andre Johnson is a professor of rhetoric and media studies uh, at the University of Memphis and a distinguished professor of religion and public theology at Memphis Theological Seminary. He is also the director of the newly created Center for the Study of Rhetoric, Race, and Religion. Dr. Johnson's research examines the intersection of rhetoric, race, and religion, and he teaches courses in political communication, African American rhetoric, and public address, as well as religious communication, interracial communication, prophetic rhetoric, and social movements. He is a widely regarded, preeminent scholar of the life and works of AME Bishop Henry McNeil Turner and has published 2 award-winning books and numerous articles and book chapters on Bishop Turner. Dr. Johnson is currently working on a book on the 19th century colored convention movement. In addition to his academic success, Dr. Johnson serves as the senior pastor of Gifts of Life Ministries in Memphis, Tennessee. Join me in welcoming our esteemed guest, Reverend Dr. Andre Johnson. So wonderful to have you here. How are you?
I am well, and thank you so much for the invitation. I cannot go on Facebook now and say I was not invited. I was invited by the great Reverend Dr. Robert, so thank you again.
Oh, it is indeed my honor. I'm excited for the conversation we will have. This is Black History Month, which is perhaps more important now than ever, with so much at stake with the erasure of Black history. And so we want to take this opportunity to scream, celebrate, shout, proclaim the goodness it is to be Black.
Right.
That Black is indeed beautiful, and we are excited to exalt our history and heritage, recognizing that every day is Black history, particularly for those who embody it. So thank you. And I want to ask you, what do you view as the significance of Black history for a time such as this?
Wow. What do I? It's so much. It's just so much. Let me just start off by saying, first of all, again, thank you for the invitation to come. I go if pronouns, I go by he, him, and his, and I'm showing up in this space right now. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to be in this space. But I'm showing up in this space right now with a blue top on with Greek letters Phi Beta Sigma and Fraternity Incorporated with a black sweatshirt underneath. I am in a room with books behind me and sitting in a chair and having a conversation with the great Dr. Robert. I come by way of the child of Rose Marie Johnson Brown and Charles Siggers. I was raised by William Randolph, and I am honored to be the husband of Lisa Jones Johnson. And I have many nieces and nephews, and I have a whole lot of folk praying for me, people at G Life, people at my different schools that I have the privilege of serving and working at. And I am just honored that I stand on the shoulders of the ancestors. My grandmother, Bessie Mae, my grandfather, Violas Johnson, and a host of others. Tom Stewart, I was blessed to know and meet my great grandfather, and Miss Rosie Stewart, his wife. And so it is again an honor and a privilege to be in this space and in this place. Black History Month is so important now, more than ever before, because as you know, Blackness It's being under attack. And that's what I like to say. Blackness is being under attack. It's the whole idea, anything that is um, known as or pointed out as or um, anybody that's talking about anything dealing with black or blackness, it is being under attack right now. So it is incumbent upon us to, first of all, learn our history, to share our history, and to know our history, know it in here, know that there are people, the people that I like to write about and study, that have gone through the crucible of being attacked because of their blackness. And somehow, some way, they made it through to be able to pass the baton rather to us. So I need folks to understand it is so crucial now to understand and to know Black history and not just the Black figures. That's important too, but the history surrounding those figures, the context in which those figures live. So, again, it is very, very important. And I am just so glad that I am here with an opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. But since we're throwing up letters, let me let me
Go
share mine. Let
ahead.
me share mine. So I am showing up in this space with the best color of the rainbow. It's called Crimson and Cream. And I have some Fenty MVP red lipstick to match it, along with some blonde box braids and red earrings signifying our heritage with the continent Africa inscribed there. Black sweater with the Greek letters Delta Sigma Theta, representing the biggest and best sorority incorporated. And I am glad to be joined here with the Pan-Hellenic love and D9 love. I also come from a people in which I'm extremely proud of, particularly a single poor Black mother named Carol Smith and her mother, Fanny Johnson, and the 8 other siblings who hail from Williamston, North Carolina,
Right.
and migrated to Harlem, New York. So I'm a product of Harlem, and my pronouns are she and her as well. So Dr. Johnson, thank you for that introduction and reminding us the importance of Black history and knowing it in our heart. But, you know, for so much of our social and political climate, that history is currently at stake. And so I wonder if you could tell us, just for the record, from your perspective, what are some key starting points or highlights in the history of African people, but also what are some glaring misrepresentations or even fallacies?
Wow. How long we got? Let's. One of the things that I find fascinating on one end, but also disappointing, is when we study the period of Reconstruction.
Yeah.
And of course, your question, we can go all the way back to Africa, and we can do that. But when we talk about African Americans or Africans on the soil, what is now known as the United States of America, right? Um, the Reconstruction period is the closest period in history to me now that we are now living in. After Reconstruction, post Reconstruction, with all of the gains that Black people made, all of the sacrifices that Black people made, all of the work that Black people, that was just literally snatched away, taken away. Um, it was in that time that this country did not punish the Confederacy, did not hold them accountable. How can you fight against a country and rebel against a country, and literally 5 years later, you can be elected, as in the case of Tennessee, governor of the state when you were like a general in the Confederate Army, and you become the governor of the Union or the United States. It's just remarkable. And I bring up that point because we saw here an attempted coup January 6, 2021. And I have been asking the question, how can the same people who were supporting the insurrection get right back into office? And and then some people are shocked of how they rule. That this is the point that I try to make in my classes, that Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction gives us examples of how our time is going on right now. And so I am just, I know we're going to talk about later my some of the work that I'm doing now with the color conventions and all of that. But but back to the question, it is the Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction period for me speaks to how and why we are in the situation that we find ourselves in today. Because the exact same thing, the erasing of Black history, this whole lost cause narrative, and the Dunning School of Historiography, which pretty much said that Reconstruction was a failure because Black people were in charge. Some of the same language, some of the same rhetorical templates that were used in the 19th century are being used today. And so I just find that fascinating on one end as a scholar and looking at it, but also highly disappointing that we are reliving a lot of this.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing the ways in which history comes back to haunt us and why it is so important for us to know it so that we can resist, right?
Mhm.
And to also point out the contradictions of racism in America, right? And the contradictions of even religion, right? A religion that, Jesus being a first century abolitionist who read from the scrolls of Isaiah to announce his purpose, his ministry was
Yep.
to set the captives free, was to
Yep.
feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to those who are thirsty, to heal the brokenhearted,
Mm.
right? That there was a social plan in Jesus's ministry, yet there's a contradiction in not a God of liberation, but the God of white supremacy that undergirds the idea that God isn't for everyone's liberation, that God is this exceptionalist, right? That is only for the powerful, the privileged. And so that is a contradiction that we see in religion, but you also mentioned the contradiction we see in race, that the people who undermine democracy can't be the same people who are in charge of it, right?
Wow. Mm.
And so I want you to talk to us about these contradictions specifically within Trump's presidency. We
Mhm.
have seen a ban list that includes books, words, and ideologies.
Mm.
Why do you think the government is so vested
Mm.
in rewriting history with the erasure of marginalized groups, particularly Black people?
I'm so glad you brought it up because it is a rhetorical action plan.
Mm.
It is, and I know there are rhetoricians and other scholars right now that's looking at and studying that right now. Here's the reason behind all of this. In hopes that you will never find out, you may never know. And if you may never know, you may not know how to act. And if you don't know how to act, you will eventually begin to accept whatever comes our way. It is it is remarkable, first and foremost. And well, let's just go back 5 years. About like 5 years ago, going on 6 years now, but 5 years ago in the summer of 2020, when everybody in the midst of a pandemic responded to the murder, and I say murder, of George Floyd.
Yeah.
People come out, people were asking about books to read, people were asking about things to do, what type, who needs money, can I give money to some causes that's doing this work and all. And immediately in response to that outpouring, the country immediately begins to attack it and begin to attack the books, the language that was being used, the movement itself, and any mistake was blown out of proportion. So by the time you get to 2024, people have forgotten about the united front, if you will. That becomes the largest social movement in American history by far, the summer of 2020. And somehow we have forgotten about all of that. And so it becomes much easier now to ban books, to ban words, to ban phrases, to sign executive orders, because now people are capitulating and saying, oh, okay, which also leads me to believe that maybe you really wasn't fully on board to begin with because you're capitulating. You are capitulating too easily. You're not even trying to put up a fight. You're saying, well, hey, we would like to do it this way, but we have to do it this way now because that's the law. And usually when people start saying that, it is because they somehow secretly, and sometimes not so secretly, agree to what's going on. So this is why we as church, we as people, we as folk who understand what is at stake, we need to share our books. We need to share our teachings. We need to have all kinds of abolitionist schools in our church basements and in our fellowship halls, in libraries if we can, in other spaces and places. I have been calling for hush harbors to reappear, and so we can begin to start having these kind of conversations and dialogues, because a lot of people don't understand the period in which we find ourselves in, and it's up to us to try to share what it is that we know and to try to help the people move forward.
Thank you. In a time where misinformation is a privilege, information becomes power.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important for us to control the narrative, because we understand that misinformation is a tool of empire, and it is part of the 12-point plan of authoritarianism.
That's
right? And so the erasure of history and of facts,
Mm-hmm.
right, is the tool that is used for oppression and to undermine our democracy. And so we have to keep telling the story anyway. And what is so powerful, Dr. Johnson, about our history
Mm-hmm.
is that it was not a history that was written. It was a history that was transcribed.
Mm-hmm.
So we hold the power, because unless they unaliven us, right? Like, we always have the power to tell our story, that we don't have to depend on what they decide to publish or not publish, right? But it was the griots. It was these storytellers. It was the stories that was transmitted from mother to daughter at the kitchen table with the hot comb or hair braiding. And so the power of our history is to not be silenced.
Wow.
So that we can continue to tell our story.
And that was long before oral history becomes a thing in the academy, right?
Yes.
And I'm thinking now about going back to your previous question about book bannings and stuff. I mean, once we begin to make the connections, then we begin to see, oh, this is one of the reasons why they did not want enslaved folk to know how to read or write. Because if you don't know how to read and write, then you may not know what you need to know. But as you just mentioned, Dr. Robert, that still didn't stop the information, because the oral traditions kept being passed down. And so we may need in this, I love how you said it, in this age of misinformation or disinformation, information becomes the powerful tool that we need. So I am inspired even right now to do even more. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I know you your area of expertise is rhetoric. So before I pivot to the more specific historical figures that is also a part of your expertise, tell us why in an age where misinformation is privilege, why information is power through the lens and expertise of rhetoric and race.
I've been trying to drill in on that question all week long. I was in you know, back in January, I was in a 1 week um, intensive and religious communication and public theology. And one of the things that we have wrestled with from the beginning to the end was the fact that we were trying to figure out what rhetoric, what words, what language choice, how do we come into a space that's already noisy, that's already filled with chatter, that's already filled, and and maybe the first and foremost step that we need to do, we need all to do, is to walk into or to be in a space. And when we find ourselves, well, a cacophony of voices already echoing, one of the things that we can do is go back to the Africana tradition of communication. And one of the first canons, or the first canon of Egyptian rhetoric, is silence, is to sit and to discern, and not just to jump quickly and to write your think piece or to write or to say something quickly, but to sit for a moment and just hear and listen and then discern what it is that you need to say, and to be grounded and mocked, which is truth, wholeness, um, shalom, well-being, and being an authentic person of truth and a bearer of truth, meaning that I believe what I'm about to say or write right now is true, and if not, I have opportunity to come and to rectify or to apologize or to make right, but to stand in that truth and to keep pushing truth. Case study I did a while ago was on the January 6th insurrection. And as much as people are saying that wasn't an insurrection, that was just people walking and having a good time. A few folk got out of hand, maybe, but they were just tourists, and they were, much as all of that was going on, I just kept speaking the truth. Don't be gaslit. Don't be fooled. It's in here. Discern what it is for yourself. If it doesn't sound right, if it sounds quirky, then it might not be right. And you need to do a little bit more investigation if you really want to, find out the truth about that matter, because everything that's coming on our social media feeds is not, first of all, it's just not true, and it is not for our best interest.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're going to have to protect ourselves, and this comes down to election time, when people are pitting us against one another. It's time out for that. We have to come together and to begin to understand that, hey, I know what it is that you're trying to do. I know what you want me to do. I know where you're trying to point me. I know where you're trying to persuade me to do, but I'm not going to do that, because I know your game now, and I am going to do something that's going to benefit me and my family and ours and the whole of the community. Because going back to the African traditional communication lenses again, Ubuntu says, I am because we are, and I cannot be if you are not who you are.
Mm. Yeah, that's really good. And I think it was John, in John, where it says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Amen.
Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So there is liberation in truth telling. That truth telling is a form of resistance, and it's
That's
also
right.
a holy and sacred act.
Yes.
Right. And that is very important, and I'm glad that you raised it. I'm also glad, and as you were identifying significant historical periods, there is a richness to understanding that our history does not start in slavery.
Right.
As we talk about truth is freedom, then let's be clear that our history does not begin in our servitude. But there is a rich history that dates back to Africa, the continent, right? That continent that is one of the richest lands of natural resources, a continent that originated civilization, a continent where we were kings and queens and inventors and tribal leaders and whole families, right? And when we talk about the truth is that war is waged against that land, that rhetoric and narratives are waged against that land because of the richness that came from it, that we wouldn't be who we are, back to Ubuntu, right? America wouldn't be who it is without the origins of the human race and civilization, sciences, math that comes from the continent Africa. And if we can't be proud of that, right, then it alters our self-determination and identity. And so there's a vestment in teaching us that Africa isn't the starting point, slavery is, right? But what I like about the work that you're doing is also recognizing that our history in America is rich when we start from Reconstruction and also not slavery, right? And so when I teach my course at the University of Kansas, Jailbirds and Jayhawks, Abolition and Bleeding Kansas, I look at abolition's starting point from a pre-Reconstruction, Reconstruction, and post-Reconstruction, not a pre-antebellum and post-antebellum narrative. But and I'm setting this context because I want us to go deeper and to drill down into some specifics, right? Talk about, in this timeline, Africa, pre-Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, where do we learn about Henry McNeill Turner? Who is a historical figure that is at the center of your work? Talk to us about the importance of Henry McNeill Turner for Black history.
Oh my God, I can talk about that all day, all 28 days of the month, really. Turner was born February 1st, 1834. So, apropos, I guess, he's born in Black History Month, but which we now know is Black History Month. But what can we say about Turner? Turner lived through, you brought up antebellum. He lives through that period. He was never enslaved himself, but he worked alongside the enslaved. And so the stories and all of the songs and all of the knowledge and the wisdom that came from those ancestors were poured into him. He's self-taught, so he's an autodidact. He taught himself how to read and write, and by the time it was all over, he spoke Hebrew and Greek and, of course, English, and then other languages and dialects. He becomes, during the Civil War, the first African-American chaplain of the Union Army, which is now, of course, the United States of America. He becomes a state legislator. He becomes all of these wonderful things, becomes a bishop, and all of those type of things. But he is a fascinating figure because you can see, and this is what I try to chart out in my writings on Turner, his rhetorical trajectory, or his growth as a theologian, really, or his growth as a religious studies person or a person of faith, because he starts off as one of the, I would argue, one of the most conservative folk as it relates to the Bible, because this is what he had read and this is what he had read of others, and he believed it. And by the time, in 1915, when he passes away, he is one of the most progressive thinkers of the age. And ordaining women in 1885, saying that we ought to have a black understanding of the Bible. And as some of the women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, during the 1890s, were contemplating doing a woman's Bible, he was saying we ought to have a black Bible. And and all of his work, all of it, points to an abolitionist framework, freedom, liberation, and democracy, as he began to grow and to see the context in which he finds himself. One of the most fascinating things is that, in 1866, he gives the Emancipation Day speech on the first day of emancipation for black folk. And he gets up there and in his close, he says, let bygones be bygones. Let us not hold any grudges. Let us be brothers, and we can come together to work together to make a better place for everybody. He is very conciliatory. By 1895, hell is an improvement as far as the Negro is concerned. He is totally away from that. So the fascinating piece about his life and his work is, how does he make that shift? How does he make the change? And he does it by drawing on, of course, his black faith, drawing on the his folk that he grew up with, drawing on some of the ministers who had poured into him, and of course, being a thinker of and being a theologian, or what we now would call a public theologian. He's doing theology in the public, and he's, criticizing, and he's rereading his Bible, and he's growing, and he's leaving these nuggets of wisdom for all of us to share. So I can just go on with Turner. Turner was just a remarkable figure. 61 years in public life. He lived and to see, he saw slavery, he saw the Civil War, saw all those battles. He saw Reconstruction, became part of the Georgia State Legislature, and then of course he's seen post-Reconstruction and even the turn of the century before he passes away.
Wow. So he occupied multiple spaces, the religious and the state, the church and politics. And so that's very interesting. The first African-American chaplain, a state legislator, and also a bishop in the AME Church. I am ordained AME. I'm an itinerant elder in African Methodism. And, to become ordained, I remember getting asked the question by Bishop Norris, who were the four horsemen? And Henry McNeil Turner is one of them. But talk to us, who is influencing Turner to become all the things that you mentioned? And then also, who is influenced by Turner after his passing and contemporary scholarship and even religious leaders?
Oh, wow. I mean, Turner had some influencers. It starts, and this is what I talk about in the book and The Forgotten Prophet. It starts at the feet of his grandmother. You mentioned about those oral stories. The reason why Turner was such a great storyteller or a great preacher even was the fact that his grandmother used to sit him out on the porch and talk about stories. And that's when he learned, as family lore told it, that Turner's grandfather was an African king. And he was caught up in the slave trade. And when they brought him to America and found out that he was this African king, and he could not be enslaved because you, quote, could not enslave royal blood, or some law was saying. And so he wasn't enslaved. But that story stayed with Turner. Turner told that story, I don't know, maybe 200, 300 times throughout his life. It stayed with him because it helped him understand going back to what you said earlier about not starting here, that there is an African past where we were kings and queens. There was an African past where there was some um, notoriety to my name, and Turner always fell back on that. The second influencers of Turner, especially early on, believe it or not, were women. And the women who were in his church that helped him preach, helped him write. He is one of the things I love about Turner is that he just didn't keep that to himself. He will write about uh, women who helped him with his sermon and sermon preparation, the English language, and all of those things early on in his ministry. Mrs. Harden, I believe her name was, when she passed away, he writes this beautiful obituary of her in the Christian Recorder. And by the way, shout out to the AME Church and the Christian Recorder newspaper. Had it not been for the, we wouldn't know half of what we know about 19th century Black church life and about Black church, period, and just Black people and Black communities had it not been for the Christian Recorder newspaper. So thank you for that. I always like to shout out my AME sisters and brothers.
And shout out to John Thomas, who is now
my good friend John Thomas. Yes,
pushing that publication forward.
So Turner is influenced then, and of course, Daniel Payne was a big influence. He always looked up to Payne, even when Payne, didn't really want him to be too involved in politics, or he got a little bit too radical for Bishop Payne. He still looked up to him. And last but not least, influencers early on that helped Turner is some of the earlier enslaved preachers that he heard. He said that, like Old Man Sankey, for instance, I think that was one of the preachers that he said Old Man Sankey can out preach anybody today. He'll preach circles around folk today. He was really in touch with the spirit and in tune to what's really going on. So Turner was one of those preachers that talked about the spirit a lot, that you had to be, in the spirit, to proclaim the word of God. And he said that those enslaved preachers did just that because of their condition, but they still preach with vim and vigor. So those are some of his influencers. Who he influenced? A whole bunch of folk. Oh my God. But one of the ones that he really looked up to in his older age was another one of your bishops, Reverend Ransom. He thought Reverend Ransom and what he was doing eventually would do it in Chicago with the Institutional Church, AME Institutional Church, was just awesome. He thought that some of the bishops who came, after him, some of them, were not as, radical as Turner might have been, but he still influenced them a whole lot. He influenced a lot of your AME counterparts in Africa, and I think the theology we talk about today, I think one of the more contemporary figures who has gone on to be with the ancestors, of course, is James Cone, and some of the scholarship now that AME ministers and all of us do with his whole God as a Negro concept, or I like to just say his proclamation, if you will. And if you think about that, in 18...
Let me stop you there, though, before we get to God is the Negro. You said, can we believe it, that Turner was influenced by women? Yes.
Exactly.
I can believe it. And
I want to make that known too, because Turner talked about that. That's why we know about it today. He wrote about that. He didn't keep it to himself. Yes.
Yeah, and feel free to say more about that. Because the AME Church was one of the first denominations to elect and consecrate a woman to bishop. Bishop Vashti McKenzie being the first elected and consecrated bishop in the AME Church, also my soror. And we have women, a very active and robust women in ministry. And in fact, a lot of bishops aren't elected to this day without the support of women in ministry. And so women are a strong force in the AME Church, but we aren't often or always given the reciprocity that we deserve. And that's not just in the church. We can look broadly in society as well. Black women being one of the most civically engaged and active voting bloc. And yet we are underrepresented in many offices, if not all areas of government. Likewise, in the church, we are the primary stakeholders, instrumental historically and currently in electing our leaders, but there's just a small space reserved for us to actually lead the church, not only at the Episcopal level, but also first churches in the denomination and the connection.
Right.
So I want you to think, and of course, this would be putting words in Henry McNeil Turner, Bishop Turner's mouth, but what would Bishop Henry McNeil Turner say to his fellow bishops, colleagues, and AME pastors for the state of the church today on issues of gender, but also sexuality?
I think, first of all, on issues of gender, I think the way that Turner, the trajectory where Turner was going, today he will be more. When he tried, I'll frame it this way. When he ordained Sarah Hughes in 1885, ordained her as an elder, and she had already been preaching all around North Carolina. Everybody recognized her gifts and abilities. She was in line, and he was laying hands on folk and did not. He looked up, did the same thing to her that he did to all the other men. And when the other bishops, however, rescinded the ordination, he left it alone. He just did not. He didn't do it anymore. He kept on, writing pronouncements about women and being that they should be able to preach, that they should be able to be ordained, and all of that. But he didn't push it. I think today, if he was living, he would be really on that side of empowering women in ministry. Full stop. Full stop.
Full stop.
Same thing with gender, and I think the way that Turner was going, at his death. Of course, we don't know, but I think if you take a liberationist position in your theology, in your scholarship, and anything really, you are open to things. You have to be, because you understand that I am not totally free until you are totally free. So I think Turner would have been one of the leading bishops as it relates to gender and sexuality as well. As far as what's going on now and with the other bishops, I unequivocally know, I think, what he would say. It would be almost the same thing he was saying during the 1890s and during the 1900s, when he and the bishops would go at it in the newspapers. Turner was very pessimistic about America during that time. He didn't think America was living up to its values and could not live up to its values. That's why he promoted immigration. He was like, let's get out of here, which, by the way, is a full stop, work stoppage. We gone, we out. And I always ask people, just think about for a moment, if the 1 million or 2 million people that Turner said was needed to go to Africa and to eventually work with Africans. It was at first, like everybody else, let us go and help out the Africans. But he really realized after his trips to Africa that, they're pretty good. They got a whole lot going on. We need to go and work with them.
Absolutely. That Pan-Africanist movement is important. And so tell me, because of the pro-Black agenda and the pro-African repatriating back to Africa agenda of Henry McNeil Turner, talk to us about the significance of the proclamation that you mentioned, that God is a Negro. Now, we know Jacqueline Grant, decades later, argues that God is a Black woman,
Yep.
right? And we know James Cone says God is on the side of the oppressed and that Jesus is Black, right?
Uh-huh.
And these traditions are predating to a proclamation that is coming way before through the mouth of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who argues that God is a Negro. What does this declaration mean today in this current political climate with a God of white supremacy running rampant
Right.
and this idea of white Christian nationalism? So talk to us about this declaration of God as a Negro.
I think great question. I think it can represent two polar opposite of opinions. First of all, of course, God is a Negro, as Turner mentions in his writing when he talks about God being a Negro, that nobody, and he's really talking about people of Christian faith, if you cannot imagine God looking like you or being like you, in features and all of that, then that's what he literally said. There is no hope for people who cannot see God uh, as themselves. So because therefore you are nullifying you being made in the image of God. So his argument, everybody from time immemorial, he said, everybody knew that or understood that was um, that God was uh, they were made in the image of God, that God was like them. And so that's important because if you understand that you are made in the image of God, then you can do things. You can carry yourself in different ways. You can do this work. You can stand and be truthful to the faith. So yes, that is important, and that's still important today because if God is a Negro or if God is Black, then God is not the white supremacist God that is running rampant today. But on the flip side of that, the little piece that I did a while back as well too, that if to be on the theodicy side, the William Jones side, is God a white racist? So if God, well, no, if God is a Negro, the question may be, is God Uncle Ruckus? Is God, is God, okay, if I could say God is a Negro or God is Black, why is it that it seems like God really, sometimes, Lord, come on now, you don't seem like you really kind of, like who you are. And
Well, let me push back on this.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Let me push back on
That's
it.
the other side. Yeah.
Is the claim that God is a Negro, is that exclusionary? Is it literal? Is it figurative? Is it symbolic? And is it exclusionary? Is God other things? Is God bigger than language, bigger than social identifiers? Talk to us.
No, you're right. That is actually Turner's point in saying God. He is not saying God is literally a Negro. He is trying. This is a rhetorical trope. He is trying to get people to understand, because he even leaves room, and when you read the God is the Negro text, he even leaves room that God being woman, being other things. That's what you mentioned. So yes, Turner is trying at this point, when everything is against Black folk, all of the teachings, all of religion, all the angels being right, all of the pictures, everything, all of the laws, everything, school, what you read in history books is against Blackness. The very thing that you must do in the midst of all of that is to believe that you are still loved by God and that you are made in the image of God. When you lose that, you lose all hope. That's Turner.
Yeah, and they used to say, "Take that to the bank." Now I feel like we need to say, "Take that to Trump."
All right now.
And so it is a very important claim that God is a Negro that is especially freeing, liberating, for today, because as you opened up with, that history becomes this pendulum of back and forth, right? And we are swinging back in time. And if we are swinging back in time with oppressive tools, then we have to swing back with the tools that we use to fight oppression then. And that is these statements, whether rhetorical or otherwise, that God is a Negro, that God is on the side of the oppressed, that God is a liberator. And it's important for the Black church and religious leaders to espouse this liberation theology over and against the agenda of white Christian nationalism. And even the evangelical hyper spiritualizing, the idea that we cannot speak about religion and politics, right? That we have to be so heavily bound that we are no earthly good, right? And that is, back to this point of truth telling, that is a lie, right? And so we got to tell the truth and shame the devil. And the truth is that religion is political, because it was the state that sought to execute Jesus, right? And that Constantine co-opted the religion of Christianity that became a state religion. So religion, particularly Christianity, is deeply political, and Christianity was used to justify the slaveocracy, and it continues to be used to weaponize scripture against the undocumented, against Black people, against queer people, and those who are on the margins. And so this claim that is rhetorical but also political is important for a faith that liberates. And so I hope that our church, from the mouth of one of its founders, particularly in the AME Church, will continue in this prophetic tradition of speaking truth and unapologetically Black about who we are and the importance of our image in God who looks like us. And I just want to, and I know you want to jump in there. As you are crafting your response, I also invite you to share with us how does this make Bishop Turner abolitionist, right? And what is the important for abolition for the Black church?
Abolitionist to me means freedom, liberation, and justice. One of the things that Turner was trying to do when he realized that the big move, going back to Africa, probably would not happen because of a whole lot of different issues and problems, namely money and ships and all of that. It's not because it was not the will of the people. The will of the people, especially in the South, they were ready to go anywhere. And we see that. One of the things that Turner's rhetoric does that I think is abolitionist in this way is that it freed the minds of many folk who really honestly thought that they were literally, not figuratively, but literally inferior to especially white people, and really all people, but mostly white people. And that when you feel like that, you don't feel like doing nothing. You just sit in it. And what Turner did was fire up people to begin to understand that, yeah, I am made in the image of God. I can do all things. I can do these things. And so what I argue in the book is that Turner's immigrationist rhetoric becomes this liberation rhetoric that frees folk to steal away, if you will, in the middle of the night and to move up north. They moved as far as they could in order to find freedom and to find some modicum of decency and respect to their persons and to their family and their kin. So I like to think that Turner's immigrationist rhetoric in the last third of his life, the way that he was talking about and critiquing America, pinpoint critiques that we still use today, how he was critiquing folk who adopted the main line embedded theology of its day, including some black preachers, and the back and forth that they were going in on. The way that he did all of that is to me, at least when I study his rhetoric, is an opening of freedom, liberation, something akin to what people say that a Robert Terrell would say about a Malcolm X later on, and other freedom fighters who help people understand that you are really more than what they say that you are. Matter of fact, you're a whole lot more. You are not what they say that you are. And you need to start believing that and start receiving that for yourself. And a lot of black people did. And that's why a lot of black people moved and self-liberated themselves, even in slavery times, but also liberated themselves or attempted to during those tough and trying times when everything was against them.
Yeah, thank you. And that what you're sharing with us also speaks to the power of rhetoric to shift narratives. So I thank you for emphasizing that. As we look to conclude this time together in this important conversation, I want to pivot and for you to segue into your more recent work.
Mhm.
You're writing a book currently that's talking about the 19th century colored convention movement. What is this historical moment and why is it important?
Well, once again, shout out to the AME Church.
Hey.
In 1830 at Mother Bethel in Philadelphia, the first a color convention was held. Richard Allen, of course, hosted, and the color conventions have been a movement during the 19th century that predates the abolitionist movement, predates the anti-slavery movement, and gave rise to many of the orators that we know about in the 19th century. Frederick Douglass, Bishop Turner, Francis Ellen Watkins Hopper, so on and so on. So this color convention movement is the first sustained movement led and operated by black people in the 19th century. It is, it is, I actually argue that it is um, um, the founding understanding of what we now know as, quote, social justice rhetoric. The black rhetorical tradition is birthed out of this. And what I mean by that is, of course, black people have been writing and speaking way before 1830 or 1865, which I dated because that's when black Southerners could actually speak freely because they were emancipated. So this black rhetorical tradition that we now know and understand is kind of birthed out of these color conventions. It's like I said, black owned, black ran. These were black spaces and places to talk about politics, to talk about what's going on in the community, what's going on in our churches, and what can we do. It was the first political operation that we had, even before the 15th Amendment, when black men got the right to vote. But even when those votes were suppressed, in really, I know we like to say southern states, but really it was all over. And so the point that I'm trying to make with this edited collection and my future writings with the color conventions, I want us to go back and read those minutes, those documents, and see what they were doing in these spaces and places in which they met. And the I'm so thankful that they had secretaries and people collected minutes and they made pamphlets, and the black newspaper were reporting and chronicling what was going on. It was just a movement in and of itself, and I am so excited about this new project. I think I'm gonna do a couple of things with it, and the first right now is this edited collection. And then I got one that's coming out just on the Tennessee state color conventions from 1865 to 1875, and trying to show how the state of Tennessee moved from one of the first states, if not the first state, I think it was the first southern state to grant suffrage to black men. And by 1870, electing a Confederate, a former Confederate general as governor. And by 1875, Tennessee is not known as being anything looking like a progressive state. So,
Well, thank you so much. After the first book on our AME bishop, I think we were ready to give you your deacon ordination.
well,
But after a second book that's coming out of the mothership, I think you might earn your elder ordination, honorary elder ordination in the
come on
AME
now,
church.
come on,
But
come on. I would be honored if I am found worthy of the great AME Church. But yeah, but
and what I appreciate about the AME Church, that it is impossible to talk about Black history and not mention our bishops and founders.
you can't. No.
And so I really appreciate that. And as well as our women in ministry, Charina Lee and others.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for keeping that history alive. As I'm going to go into this rapid round of fun questions for you. But first, tell us, how can people support your work? Give us the titles of your books, how we can purchase it, and ways that people can stay connected with you.
Well, the three Turner books now. The Forgotten Prophet, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, and the African American Prophetic Tradition. And all these books are widely available. If you just Google them, they'll pop up. Um, my second book, monograph on Turner, No Future in This Country, The Prophetic Pessimism of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. That is with Mississippi Press. And then there's a third book on the speeches on Bishop Turner. And I think I'm also looking for a publisher to publish some of the writings that we find in the Christian Recorder and other newspapers, which are more, what's the word I want to use? Jarring, maybe even more entertaining. Makes people want to, wow, did he say that back in 1888? Yes, he did. And so we're looking at doing something like that. But my latest book was the summer of 2020, George Floyd and the Resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. And there might be something, at least something coming out behind that to talk about this period after 2020, kind of leading us up to how we get to this period. But we'll see. But those are within the context of what we're talking about, are some of the books and writings and stuff like that. You can reach me on social media at AE Johnson PhD. All of the handles. Not really on Twitter anymore or X, but Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram. I'm there. And if you are led by the Spirit, the best way financially to support is just to support our church, Gifts of Life Ministries, right here in Memphis, Tennessee. If you Google Gifts of Life, you'll see ways to give financially and otherwise. And I pointed all that back to the church. So thank you in advance for all of your support.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. And also, we would have to get you on our Abolition Academy so that we could put a course together that is connecting the dots of then and now of our Black leaders, including Turner, through the George Floyd movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and the this current context. Likewise, we would love to invite you onto our social media platform. And so while people are exiting Twitter, we are also an alternative. You can download the Abolitionist Sanctuary app, and you can apply to become a member on our social platform, which is a sanctuary away from biased algorithms and vicious bots. But we are a group of people who are connected by justice and liberation. And so I invite you to join our social media platform as well. And then the last church announcement I have is when you talk about the work that you're doing, this archival work, it also reminds me of the importance of our churches to digitize our liturgies, our Bible studies, our announcements and programs, so that we could continue to transmit our history over and against the state trying to undermine it. So as we go into this rapid round, Dr. Johnson, I'm going to throw out some words, and you give me the first thought that comes in mind. Doesn't have to be a sentence, a phrase, just a thought, a word that comes to mind. You ready?
Okay, this is going to get me in trouble. Come on.
James Cone.
Prophet.
Gary Dorian.
Wow. Awesome.
Henry McNeil Turner.
Prophetic pessimism.
Faith.
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 Journey.
Preaching.
Proclamation.
The Academy. This silence, your silence gave it to me.
but needed, you know, yeah, but powerful, but needed.
Bourbon.
Old fashions, baby. Come on.
We know why we're laughing. All right. Favorite way to relax?
Oh, wow. Looking at some mindless TV sometimes. Yeah.
Beach or mountains?
Probably the beach.
Netflix and chill or turn up?
Depends. Sometimes the turn up is nice. Sometimes Netflix and chill is nice. So
Black history.
Need it.
And last and not least, Abolitionist Sanctuary.
Grateful.
Thank you for joining this conversation on the Abolitionist Sanctuary podcast. Please download and share on all platforms. Again, I am your host, Reverend Dr. Nikia Smith-Robert, the founder and executive director of Abolitionist Sanctuary. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and download our social media app. Also, email us to join our newsletter. You can enroll in our courses and become certified at abolitionacademy.com. Don't forget to become a member and subscribe to our mailing list at abolitionistsanctuary.org. As we conclude this episode, remember that abolition is not only a practice, but it is a way of life. And for me, abolition is my religion. Let's lead a faith-based abolitionist movement together. Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for joining our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.